Welcome, everybody. Dr. Espen here. Today, we are privileged to speak with Lago, who is a peak performance coach, TEDx speaker, podcaster, and leading expert in the field of resilience and transformation. This is going to be an exciting conversation when you hear Amberly's story today and you learn the tools as to how you can get yourself out of the rut or challenge or obstacles or trauma. I think you're going to find some absolute golden nuggets in this conversation today. Amberly is the best-selling author of True Grit and Grace. I love the combination of that masculine, feminine, true grit and grace, and the founder of Unstoppable Life Mastermind. Through her book, coaching methods, and masterminds, she has curated unique tools to help other people tap into their superpower and resilience, both in life and in business. So I want to say a very special thank you, Amberly. Thank you for taking the time to be with us here today, all the way from Dallas, Texas. How are you today?
Oh, I am so happy to finally get to connect with you. This is an honor to be here, and thank you so much for that wonderful introduction as well.
It's our privilege. Thank you so much for taking the time. I would like to start by going straight there to your story. Because your story really, when I read it, firstly reminded me so much of my own journey, but I also know that people out there throughout the world, we all go through challenges, be it a motor vehicle accident or relationship challenges or health challenges or whatever it might be. So can you just start by telling us a little bit about, firstly, who you are and also then into your accident as well?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. And yes, you and I have a lot of, I think, things that we've been through that we've overcome. So I knew this was going to be a conversation that I've been looking forward to for so long. And, I think oftentimes when I hear my bio read or whatever, and we often share the highlight reel of everything, sometimes I hear, oh, wow, I've done all those things. And the only way I've really been able to do all these things that I've accomplished with the book and the podcast and all that is because I have fallen and I have failed and I have messed up and I have overcome a lot. And I think sometimes on our journey, when we're going through hard things, I know for me anyway, like really difficult challenges that I went through at a young age, have really prepared me for the hardest challenge of my life, which was 12 years ago when, I was really, I feel like living the California dream. I mean, life was good. I had a successful fitness business. I was sponsored by Nike. Running was I loved it, was my pastime. It was actually kind of my drug of choice, is what I did to feel happy and get those endorphins going. 2 healthy kids, a husband that loved me. And I really thought, wow, I've worked so hard and I'm finally living the good life. And that day, it was a Friday afternoon. I had finished work a little early. I just trained clients, ran my best time, ran 11 miles and finally beat my workout partner. And for the first time, and he was not happy about that, but I was like, life is good. And I get on my Harley and I set out to go home, and I'm just cruising down Ventura Boulevard. And I'm only going about 20, 25 miles an hour. And as a motorcyclist, you kind of look around to make sure people see you. And I saw a guy in a truck coming out of a parking lot, but I'm like, okay, he sees me. And I'm like, oh my goodness, he does not see me. He punched it out of the parking lot. I get hit, T-boned, thrown 30 feet, and I am sliding across the asphalt. And the whole time, all I could think about was just, please don't let another car hit me. I couldn't tell what I was sliding into. And when I finally came to a stop, I looked down at my leg and it was crumbled into pieces. My foot was dangling off. There was blood everywhere. And I just started screaming, call 911. I couldn't reach for my phone. I was afraid to let go of my leg because I don't know. And I thought my leg might fall off. Luckily, I had a guy who ran over And he immediately pulled his belt off and made a tourniquet around my leg. And he saved my life because I didn't know it at the time, but my femoral artery was actually severed and I was bleeding out right there on the street. So there were paramedics that were right down the street. They heard the accident. They didn't even get the call in time. They were running before they even got the call from 911. Paramedics got there. I got rushed to the hospital. The ER was crazy. I mean, crazy in the ER. And I'm thinking, wow, this can't be good. I might have to train clients on crutches for a while. Like that was my default. Like, how am I going to work? How am I going to keep a roof over my head? What are my choices? What am I going to do next? I was already trying to figure out what I was going to do. I had no idea just how serious this was. So I hear this wailing, this crying like I'd never heard before. And I realize it's my husband. Now, my husband is a first responder. He was a lieutenant commander with a highway patrol. I had never seen him cry. He was this big, tough guy. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's freaking out. Maybe I'm dying. And I thought, this could be it. And I yelled across the ER, honey, get over here. I need you to be strong for me. And he came over and he held my hand. And that's the last thing I remember before they put me in induced coma. And I woke up a little over a week later. And the first thing I learned was, I'm so sorry, we're going to have to amputate your leg. It's basically a war wound. You have a 1% chance of saving it. So we just need to amputate. And I was like, well, wait a minute. You said there's a 1% chance. So then there's still a chance. And we need to find a doctor who's willing to take that chance with me. And it took grit. Well, that's where the grit came in. And by the grace of God, a team of doctors, a lot of prayer, days of excruciating pain. Well, actually 3.5 months the first time in the hospital, and 34 surgeries later, but they were able to save my leg.
Wow. Wow. You know, sometimes when you realize that, you know, you have challenges in your own life, it's not until you hear someone else's story that you realize how blessed we are. That is incredible. And may I ask, what do you believe was the thing inside of you that made you want to go for that 1% chance? What did you feel?
You know, I have always been very, very aware of what I focus on. And I think that really comes from early on. You know, when I was 8 years old, my mom remarried my stepdad, who has since passed away, but he sexually abused me. And the shame and the pain and the frustration and the anger and all the emotions that came along with that, I realized that what I could do was do things that made me feel better by getting good grades, by running track and placing first and getting, you know, setting a record in the state of Texas, by dancing, which brought joy, by performing in front of others on stage, and seeing them light up and smile when they watched me dance. And so I became very active in school, and I focused on all of the things that I could do and noticed how that made me feel better. And so I think that from early on, I realized somehow, some way, that we don't always have a choice in what life throws our way or our circumstances, but we do have a choice on how we view it, what we focus on, and what we do with what's left. And so when they said that 1% chance, I just somehow knew, well, that's what I want to focus on, because I know I want to save my leg. And look, I know there are plenty of, you know, people with amputations. I mean, one of my friends is a double amputee, and she's amazing. And she's gone on to be an Olympian. But for me, I think my whole life being a dancer, being a runner, fitness being my livelihood, I thought I couldn't imagine not having both legs and doing all the things that I wanted to do in that moment. Now, with that being said, that was actually, and this sounds kind of crazy, but it was actually the easy part, getting through the 34 surgeries. It wasn't easy. I'm not saying it was easy. It was hell. It was pure hell. But what was hard was when I got out of the hospital, I was diagnosed. I thought, well, things are going to get better. Pain's a part of it. I was tough. I knew how to push through it. Shoot, I had a PhD and suck it up. I could get through it. But the pain was getting worse and worse. And when I went in to for a checkup, the doctor said, well, you actually have something very serious. You've got complex regional pain syndrome. He's like, your life is never going to be the same. You're going to be permanently disabled. You'll never be able to work again. And you need to go back home and just get in your wheelchair. And I said, okay, well, for how long? And he said, forever. And I felt like I had been kicked in the gut, and I cried all the way home. But again, I didn't go back and get in my wheelchair. I went straight to physical therapy, where I didn't even have an appointment that day. And Terry was like, my physical therapist was like, Amberly, what are you doing here? You're here every day. You don't have an appointment today, though. Get out of here. And I said, no, I've just learned something, and I'm going to have to work harder than I've ever worked before if I want to have the life that I've always imagined. And I didn't know how hard that was going to be, because I still live with constant chronic pain. And so I've had a lot of people go, well, do you wish that you would have amputated your leg? It would have been easier just to have that one surgery and amputated it, and instead of 34, and now you're still in pain, maybe you wouldn't have gotten this complex regional pain syndrome. But I always think, we can't go back and change the decisions, but we can decide, okay, well, these are the cards I've been dealt. How am I going to deal with it? How am I going to live my best life despite these things? And I wouldn't change it, because I feel like pain has been my biggest teacher.
Oh, beautiful. Just want to remind everybody of the book, True Grit and Grace. If you want to learn more about this story, let's buy that book and read the full story. Amberly, this is incredible, because I remember when I broke my legs as well in the motorcycle accident. I was in the hospital, and the doctor said the same thing, because I got a staph infection, and the infection was spreading through the surgeries that they had to cut out a lot of stuff where the infection was spreading. But again, it just brings me to the level of gratitude. I always say in my events when I speak, I put one foot on the ground in the morning, I say thank you. I put the other foot in the morning, I say I love you, and I say thank you and I love you to my legs every day, because I was raised with a sister that has been in a wheelchair all of her life.
And my brother has been in a wheelchair his whole life.
Oh, wow.
We have so much in common. It's unreal.
It's a lot of synchronicity happening here.
Yeah.
And wow. Yeah. And again, same thing as you, elite level athlete, having the accident, and then, beyond odds, healing ourselves. So I think it's important to really speak to the fact that it can be, this is the way I interpret it. It can be, for those watching and listening, it can seem like the most horrific, traumatic, this is just, I'm never going to recover from this. It can seem like that. But I think what I'm taking from Amberly's share here, guys, is that if you can find that 1% that you believe is there, that you believe is possible, you can find it in your heart to believe that it's possible for you to heal, that belief is going to go a long way. And wow, what a story for you to go through that. And complex regional pain syndrome, for those of you who don't know, is exactly that. We really don't know what the cause is. We really don't know how to fix it, how to cure it. We know it often comes from trauma. We know it's related to the nervous system, but it's a part where certain aspects of the body are continuously and chronically in deep, often neurological type pain, and we don't know how to fix it. We could also, associated to the traumas that you've had and the surgeries that you've had, wanting to choose the path way, powerful thing for us to discuss. I remember many years ago, I read a quote, and it was something like, your biggest problem is thinking that you shouldn't have problems. And you kind of said the same thing, Amberly, when you're saying now, we wished it differently, amputated, and the answer was no, I wouldn't have, because pain is. Can you talk a little bit about about that. I think that is really important for people to listen to these days.
Oh, well, thank you. And it's incredible that you know so much about CRPS, because it's a baffling thing. And yeah, when I say pain has been my biggest teacher, it really has taught me so much. I love that you say thank you and I love you to your legs. I say the same thing when I wake up in the morning. From the moment I put my feet on the ground, I get grateful, because most days I do experience pain. And now a lot of your listeners might be sitting here going, well, I can't relate. I've never been hit by a truck. I don't live with pain. But the truth is, we all have pain in some way that comes up, whether it's emotionally, spiritually, financially, physically. And I think that it has really taught me, because at one point, I really hated myself, and hate's a 4-letter word in our family, but I hated the way I looked. I had so much shame about the way I looked. I used to pretty much curse my leg because it didn't perform the way it was deformed. It's scarred up from the hip down. It was giving me this pain. It wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. And the moment I shifted and asked the pain, well, what do you need from me? How can I do better at what I'm doing? And I can't take credit for this shift. In fact, how it came about was, the pain was so great that I went to the doctor who did all these surgeries and saved my leg. And I was like, I've got the solution. I appreciate you saving my leg, but it is just not working for me. It is giving me way too much pain. We need to go ahead and cut it off. And he looked at me he goes, well, we can't do that. You've got CRPS and that might make it worse. And then he did something that completely shifted my perspective and changed my life. He sat my leg on his nice white coat. My first thought was, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's putting my ugly, deformed leg on his nice white coat. And then as I looked at him, he was looking at my leg like it was a masterpiece, and look at this piece of art, this 1% that he saved, and look, here it is. And he even put it in his book. It was one of the hardest medical challenges he had ever encountered. And something shifted in me. And I thought, wow, if he can look at my leg, maybe I can learn to look at myself that way too. And so instead of being upset at the pain that my leg was giving me, I started being grateful and asking how I could take better care of myself. And I think that a lot of times pain is just kind of a signal. It's trying to tell us something. And so when we get curious and ask questions, that's when we can get better in every aspect of our life. But I think that the pain has not just been something that's, shifted the way that I, view my leg and myself, and I've learned to love myself again, but it has really taught me such empathy, such compassion. When I first got back into training clients again, I had one of my clients that I had for, 25 years. And I felt so broken. I felt like, who's going to want to train with me? I'm on crutches. I used to train athletes. I used to get people ready to take their physical to pass the exam to be a California Highway Patrol. To my surprise, my business boomed because so many people saw me not giving up, and in there in my wheelchair and using my crutches and then walking with a limp. And so my business boomed, but I did still feel broken, even though my business was booming. And one of my clients that I had for almost 26 years said, Amberly, I think you're a better trainer now. Now you understand my pain more. And so I think that when we have this sort of pain and we can share that with others, it connects us on a deeper level. So it has taught me, compassion, empathy, kindness, understanding. And it's taught me a whole lot about grit, for sure.
I love this. And I remember the same thing happened to me as well. I was like, I'm an athlete. The doctor says they're going to take my leg. I said, this is just not a choice. It's just not going to happen. And it was the moment where I realized that my greatest fear had been realized. Could imagine how, when you look at your set of value systems, and fitness and health and movement is who you are. That's how you express life. That gets taken from you. I mean, that's a death of the ego right there. That's a rebirth and revelation
Oh,
in itself.
heck yeah. I mean, my whole identity, and this sounds very
Hmm.
shallow, but my whole identity, I'm going to tell you, I was known for my nickname at the gym was Legs. I competed with the guys. I was on, if you walked into any CVS or, Walgreens, you would see my picture on the vitamin labels. I was doing those infomercials and in Shape magazine. And now all of a sudden, I mean, that was my identity. And the fact that I was the main breadwinner and I was the provider, and I was like,
Hmm.
I felt just, unstoppable. And all of that came to a screeching halt when it was like the rug was ripped up out from underneath me. And I really spiraled down into a dark depression before I managed to reinvent myself. And I'm grateful for
Hmm.
that too, because it became my rock foundation, as I like to call it, where I built a new life. And I had to figure out who I was. And I think in order for you to do that, it's really important to think about, well, what brings you joy? What brought you, and maybe nothing does. So maybe it's easier to think, well, what brought you joy when you were 7, 8, 9 years old? And usually your purpose is connected to something that was joyful to you, when, brought you joy when you were when you were younger. But also, one of the things that really helped me, and I think saved me, well, two things: gratitude, because
Hmm.
it completely shifted my perspective and it got me focused on what I can't, and I still every day practice gratitude in the
Hmm.
morning for sure, at night, and throughout the day. When I feel myself slipping down into that darkness or sadness, I just get grateful. And it really shifts your focus on what you can do instead of what you can't do, and what you do have instead of what you don't have.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
being of service saved me in the hospital. And I've had people say, well, how could you be of service when you were completely bedridden in a hospital? Let me tell you, I was writing out exercise plans for the nurses and
Hmm.
give them exercise advice. I was still making calls to clients. I was writing out nutrition plans. I remember I had there I was in the hospital, not knowing if tomorrow was the day they were going to amputate my leg or not. And I got on the phone call with a client, and she called me crying because she found out she was pregnant and didn't want to have a baby. And I was like, this is great. You're going to have a new life here. I'm thinking, I might die tomorrow and you're crying about being pregnant. But I was like, you know what? As soon as I get out of the hospital, I'm going to babysit for you and everything's going to work out. But just by being there for her, and also being there for the nurses who would come in and sit down and pull the curtain and just kind of collapse and tell me all their problems. Sometimes to be of service, all people really need is to know that you're there for them, to listen to them, to see them, to hear them. And so I think that having, no matter what you do, being of service, reaching out, getting out of your own problems and going to help somebody else
Hmm.
is what really has helped me. And it still does to this day.
I love this answer. And I always say, when you find yourself nervous, always, or when fear finds you nervous, always focus on service, because it allows us to shift our focus onto what we have to be grateful for. Because when someone else brings a problem or they have a difficult solution and we go to help them, then we're focusing on assisting them, realizing that we have something so powerful to be grateful for. I just want to reiterate what Amberly just said then, guys. Here she is in a hospital. She doesn't know if she's going to have her leg another day. And she's now focusing on helping other people at the same time, which created a lot of healing for her. So the question might be, for those listening, where in your life could you be of service to others in order to find peace and healing within yourself. I love this. And this is why, particularly assisting people that have struggled or gone through similar things, there is so much inspiration in that for us and so much healing in that for us. I want to ask you, what advice do you now have for people that might have lost hope or are in a difficult situation?
I think that the best advice that I could give is to reach out for help, because that's what saved my life. I mean, here I had survived this horrific accident, survived all of these surgeries with not one infection, which was a miracle in itself. And I had tried every kind of medication out there, every kind of some invasive procedures to try to get rid of this pain from CRPS, and nothing was working. I mean, at one point I was on 73 homeopathic pills and 11 different prescription medications at one time, and nothing was working. And so I started to self-medicate by drinking. And I feel like I didn't really have a lot of tools. I feel like my tool before, and I didn't realize it until my accident, I had literally would just run to feel better, to get those endorphins going. And I had run away from so many of my problems, so many of the traumas, and not dealt with it. And now here I was, and I had no escape, and I was stuck in these feelings and this heaviness. And I felt like a prisoner to this hospital bed. And I realized, oh, this glass of wine kind of helps numb out the pain. Why didn't the doctors just tell me to have a glass of wine every day? And kind of helps me stuff down the shame and these feelings of unworthiness. And it just kind of numbed me out, and it worked until it didn't. And my life came crumbling down, and crumbling down fast. And I began to isolate and isolate. My world went from being real small or real big to real small. And I was at a place where I did not want to keep living, but I was too afraid to die. And there was just something inside me. I think we all have it. It was just that little flicker of light that was left in me. Like I had that 1% chance. All we need is that little glimmer of hope, that little ounce of courage, that little bit, and we can keep moving forward. I got on my knees and I prayed that I needed help. And my next thing I did was I made a phone call to a friend. Scarier than any surgery I had been through was taking a good hard look at my life and taking accountability for all the things that I was doing that were not working out for me, and admitting, oh my gosh, how did I go from being this elite athlete to I'm an alcoholic? Like, how did a good girl like me end up like this? Like, I was in total victim mentality. And I thought, wait a minute, I want to be an example of the victor of my life, not the victim. I want to be an example of resilience for my daughters. And I think that my daughters, it's what I focused on, and why I was willing to do whatever it took to get help. And it took so much courage to I actually called a former client of mine who I knew was sober. And I said, hey, I need help. I think I got a problem. And she said, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you. And then I didn't hear from her for like a week. And I thought, I'm going to die if I don't get help right now. And so the reason I shared that I didn't hear back from her is because sometimes we reach out for help. And I know it takes so much courage, but we reach out and people might not be able to help us right then. Even if they want to, maybe they've got stuff going on in their life. I think it's really important to be willing to help yourself. And so I Googled like 12-step recovery programs, and I found a meeting that I could go to that was when my daughter was in school and my husband was at work. And I went from sneaking my drinking to sneaking getting recovery. And, I got sober in 2016. And I think that I might not be here today if I didn't ask for help. And so ask for help because it can change your life. You don't ever have to do anything alone. You're never alone on this journey. So whether it's through prayer, whether it's through a stranger on Instagram, and made it through the other side, get some help, because it will just time collapse your journey as an entrepreneur, and it will save your life if you're struggling with something like addiction. And I just can't stress that enough, asking for help and creating that community.
Oh, beautiful. Do you believe that there's more to you than just a physical, maybe a spirit or a soul or something like that of that nature? What do you believe about you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like we're all souls that are, I feel like each one of my daughters are this special soul that was meant, for me to be a mom for them. I look out, I just moved into this house, and when we first got here, I believe in angels, and one of my angels is my great grandmother. And when I see a dragonfly, it reminds me, and their one just flew by the window, by the way, right when I said that. But when we first came to the house, there was this huge dragonfly. I mean, a dragonfly bigger than I'd ever seen. And my husband was like, "What is that, a bird?" I said, "That's a dragonfly." And I thought, that is a sign. That is like, I feel like those are like little whispers from, and I feel like I got a lot of guardian angels that have worked overtime for me. My husband he says, "My gosh, God just keeps spitting you out," because I've been hit by a car actually 3 times, but the one on the motorcycle just happens to be the worst one. So he keeps saying, "God just keeps spitting you out." And I said, well, maybe my next book should be Look Both Ways. I'm kidding. That's not what I'm going to call my next book.
The reason why I asked that question, Emily, is because many of the people in our community, our listeners, our viewers, believe similar things. We believe that there's a spirit, soul, source, consciousness, something within us, and there's creator, or whatever you want to call it. And I think for a lot of people, that's where they can find, like you mentioned, prayer many times. That's where we can find so much healing and belief and trust. And I'm just wondering, with someone like you that seemingly had it all, the fitness and the career, and you're living a life aligned with your values, where you run and you express yourself, for that all to be taken away, to be forced to deal with all of your traumas and your shame you mentioned, and then literally coming back to where you are now, there is just so much wisdom in this. And for those watching, perhaps go back and watch this again, and kind of take some notes as to what the nuggets are here, because there's a lot of golden nuggets here, and it's so beautiful to see someone going through such challenges still show up and shine. So I want to ask you, Emily, what's next in store for you? Obviously, we've got a lot of amazing stuff that you're doing with the podcast, and obviously your book we talked about before, but what's next for you now?
Well, I think we need to have you on my podcast because you're amazing. I'm hoping to visit you, one of your events, but until you can get over here into the States. But I think the thing that most lights me up right now that I just love, and actually I just had a 2.5-day event here in Dallas, and it was the first time in a long, long time that I really was like, "Oh, this is it. I'm doing what I love. I'm so blessed." I get to work with these women and open up my playbook and share with them how I have completely reinvented myself and what I do and started over. I mean, because we had $2.9 million worth of medical expenses. And I was just saying before we started recording that, I didn't own a computer 5 years ago. When I say I knew nothing about technology, I didn't have social media. I think I had an Instagram account to basically stalk my oldest daughter. But I just want to say that, you're never too late or too old or too dumb. Those were a lot of the things that I used to tell myself. when you really have a why, something that is pulling on your heartstrings and your gut is saying, go for it. And you focus on why it is you want to do the things that you want to do, there is always a way to figure out how to do it. And so I love sharing in my mastermind, how others can start, their own podcast, how they can write a book, how they can get on stages. Because let me tell you, if I can do it, anybody can do it.
That's incredible. When you shared your story before of how you got on stage and you're like, wow, this is true to me. This feels good to me. I've already seen you there on grand stages because you've been given, this is just my perspective, you've been given the right to speak from that perspective, to go from where you were into the pit and then out from pit to purpose. I often say that in the pit's where your purpose is revealed. The soul has to go through these challenges to find out who it is, to evolve, to learn, to grow, to heal, to come back to that grit and grace. And I think within that comes the authentic right for you to share your story on global stages. So absolutely, I see you running events and seminars on a large scale. And even with the podcast, you're kind of doing the same thing. Now, allowing us to get access to this and sharing this with our community is the same thing. So I just want to share that from me to you, that this is an absolute inspiration, and it gives people hope.
I just really enjoy, I've really enjoyed every minute getting to connect with you and so appreciate you letting me share with your incredible audience. I know that the people who listen to you just are going to be my kind of people because of all that you share and your beautiful heart and the big light that you are in this world. And so it's really an honor to be here. And I watch all of your events. Like I look at all that you post on Instagram and everything, and the way that you write, even a caption on a picture. I'm like, wow, I can't wait to get to know him more. And so, yeah, thank you for your kind words. And I can't wait for my audience to get to know you. I'm putting it out there.
Yeah, let's do it. I'll jump on your podcast. It's absolutely on. I'll be honored. Okay, I got a last question for you, sister. Are you ready for this one?
Yeah.
Off the cuff. Okay. So I want you now to take a minute, close your eyes if it feels good. And I want you to imagine yourself on the world stage. So right now you're on the world stage. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people there. And they've all gathered. And they're all in noble silence, waiting for you to speak, to share your message. So take it as long as you need to breathe, feel, download, whatever you need to do. And then when you're ready, would you please share with us in that scenario on the stage in front of all these people, what is your message to the world?
Well, I've been so long-winded with all of my answers. And I really think that change is possible and hope is available and the choice is yours. And true resilience is not about bouncing back and going back. And a lot of people might think that, oh, I'm just going to wait to do this when things get back to normal, or I'm just, I've got to go back to what I was doing. And what I've learned is that resilience is choosing the courage to move forward and have a life of joy, even if your circumstances have narrowed your possibilities, that there is absolutely a way to build upon your joy, even if you have pain. There's absolutely a way to level up your life. And I think that we all have resilience within us. It's just learning to tap into that resilience. And I'll share 5 things that help. And I use this every day: perspective, acceptance, community, endurance, and rest. And so if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling overwhelmed or sad or anxious, or like, why are you so tired? Or when are things going to get better? I remind myself, I need something quick. I need one word, and it's pacer. And shifting my perspective, we've talked about with gratitude every single day. I always start with gratitude. And every night I get in bed with my daughter and say, what's the best thing that happened to you? And what's one thing that you're grateful for? Because that sets the tone. And throughout the day, I use gratitude to shift my perspective. And acceptance, that was so hard for me. I didn't want to accept where I was. I didn't want to accept the way I looked. But when we can truly look at ourselves and be aware is when we can take the right action steps to make our life the best that it can be. Community, your hard work puts you where your blessings can find you. And so when you're out there being of service to others, you're building community. And I think that, yes, we're strong alone, but together we're unstoppable. And endurance, because my goodness, it takes a lot of endurance, whether you're a mom or a working mom like me, or an entrepreneur, or no matter what you're doing, or you have an incredible podcast and you schedule in those shows, it takes endurance. That's where your perseverance, that's where your grit comes into play. That's where you focus on your why to get through any hows. And the last part is R for rest. It was the hardest thing for me to learn because I was real good at the grit, but I had to learn to give myself grace. And if we really want to be resilient, sometimes we need to strategically stop and plan times throughout our day to rest and recover. Sometimes we need to slow down a little bit before we can speed up again. So I hope Pacer helps anyone who's listening the next time you're feeling discouraged.
Beautiful, Amberly. We'll get that added to the show notes. Last question. We know the book, True Grit and Grace. I would like a copy, please. I would like a copy.
You bet.
And also, where else can people find out more about you?
Oh, well, you know what? If they want that downloadable, I've got a playbook. And if you want to connect with me, it's really me texting you back. So sometimes it takes me a minute to get back, but please reach out. I would love to connect with your community. Can they text me from overseas?
I'm thinking, do you have a website or Instagram?
Yeah, I think that might be harder. You can text me at 818-214-7378, the word grit for that playbook. If you're in the States, I'm not sure it'll work if you're not out of the States. AmberlyLago.com, Amberly Lago Motivation on Instagram is kind of where I hang out the most. And you'll see some of my behind the scenes shenanigans. And yeah, you can find the podcast True Grit and Grace in my book there on the website as well. And any upcoming events that I have as well.
Incredible. Thank you for showing us not just the beauty of what's possible within trauma, but also the beauty of what's possible within finding grace in that space of suffering. That is an absolute inspiration. I'm looking forward to connecting with you again. Thank you so much for taking the time, and God bless your beautiful path. And thank you for inspiring us today.
Oh, thank you.